Today we will be working on understanding what coordinate grids are and how they work. Get out your paper that looks like this. Today we're going to be using this paper to do our work. Write your name at the top and today's date. Alright, let's read the directions. Fill in the coordinate grid with the vocabulary and information. So, the first thing we're going to look at is this line. There's a line going horizontally or side to side. It is called the x-axis. The x-axis always goes horizontally. Now, this one that goes up and down or vertically is called the y-axis. Alright, together the x-axis and the y-axis create a coordinate grid. So, this whole thing is called a coordinate grid. C-O-O-R-D-I-N-A-T-E. Alright, a coordinate grid has 4 quadrants. The letters Q-U-A-D, quad, mean 4. So go ahead, write that down. Pause the video if you need to. So the first quadrant is right here. It's everything above the x-axis that is to the right of the y-axis. So over here, we're going to write first quadrant. The first quadrant is always in the top right. Okay, then the second quadrant is still above the x-axis, but it's to the left of the y-axis. So we have the second quadrant. Which, just to remind you, is in the top half, but on the left. Then, below the x-axis and to the left of the y-axis, right here, we have the third quadrant. And that is in the bottom left. Then below the x-axis and to the right of the y-axis, we have the fourth quadrant. In the bottom right. So, in 5th grade, we mostly just use the first quadrant, but when you get to middle school, you will need to know all 4. The first, second, third, and fourth quadrants. Right now, though, we're mostly focusing here. You first need to know that the very center of where the x-axis and the y-axis meet is called the origin. So, numbers count each direction on both axes. So when we go to the right, we get positive numbers. So this would be 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, then 6. So this spot right here in the middle, we call 0. Okay, so it's 0. And also, when we're counting on the x-axis, on the left side of 0 over here, we have negative numbers. So right here would be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. Make sense? It works the exact same way for the y-axis. So, on the y-axis, when we go up, we go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the numbers keep going. It has an arrow, so they go on forever in every direction. Numbers never stop. And then down here, we have our negative numbers on the y-axis. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. So going back to the origin, it's 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. So we call the origin 0, 0, because we always write our points on a coordinate grid. We always write the x-axis first, and then we put a comma, and then we write the y-axis. And we put parentheses around them so we know they go together. For example, if I have this point right here, we can see we go over on the x-axis till we get to 4 because it lines up with 4. And then we look at the y-axis and we say this point is at 2. So our point is at 4, 2. This is called an ordered pair. So the dot is called a point, but the numbers are called an ordered pair. Let's try one more point. Right here. We're going to say this point, we look at the x-axis first. So we take it down, it's at 2. So next to it we write 2 because that is the x point. Then we put a comma and we say, what is the y-axis? The y-axis is at 6. So our point is 2, 6. Our point is at 2, 6. The ordered pair is 2, 6. And just as an added bonus, I will show you how you do it with a negative number. So let's say our point is here. We look at the x-axis first. And we say this point is at -4. So we write -4. And then a comma for our ordered pair. And we say this point is at +2. We put our 2 there. It becomes an ordered pair. So this point right here is -4, +2. Alright, we are going to look at these last 2 points because I want to look at points in each of the 4 quadrants. So we've done the first quadrant and the second quadrant. Let's try the third quadrant right here. Here is our ordered pair. So first we're going to look at the x-axis. So we take our point and we go up to the x-axis. It's at -5. So we're going to write -5, comma. Then we're going to look at the y-axis. So we go to our point and we go over. It's at -6. -6. We put our parentheses around it and we have our ordered pair. Now let's look at the fourth quadrant. Here is our point. When we try and read it and write it, we look at the x-axis first. So we go up to the x-axis. It is at 4. Then we go to the y-axis and it is at -4, comma, -4. We put our parentheses around it. All right, the last thing that I want you to know is that whenever we're in the first quadrant, all of our numbers in the x and the y-axis are going to both be positive. So when we look at the first quadrant, we have a positive number and a positive number. When we look at the second quadrant, because we're in the second quadrant, the x-axis is always going to be negative over here. The first number will always be negative. So the first number is negative, but the second number is always going to be positive because we're only in this part of the grid. So it's going to be negative, positive. Then the third quadrant, it will always be, the x-axis will always be negative and the y-axis will always be negative when we're in this part of the grid. So in the third quadrant, it's always negative, negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the x-axis is back to positive, but the y-axis is to negative. Oops. The x-axis is positive, the y-axis is negative. So that's very important to remember for middle school. But right now, we're mostly focusing on the first quadrant, but it's good for you to know these other qualities that a coordinate grid has.